Here we go, hey. To find out what to expect, I spoke earlier to Mick Mulvaney again, who's a former chief of staff in the Trump White House. Mick Mulvaney, thanks so much for talking to us again. With the whole expectation around this impeachment trial this week, there's no chance, is there, that Donald Trump is going to be impeached?
Well, technically, under our system, he's actually been impeached. There's no chance he'll be convicted and removed from office. In our system, the House impeaches, which is sort of like a grand jury investigation, and then the Senate has a trial with something along the lines of a presentation of evidence and arguments and so forth, and the Senate acts as a jury. But your point is the same and well made, which is that there's absolutely no chance that Donald Trump will be convicted in this Senate trial, no chance that he will be disqualified from further office. Of course, they can't remove him from the White House because he's already left.
Indeed. So the point is whether this is a good thing for the country or for the political system or not, or whether it actually does damage to national unity and the political system.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and I don't know if there's a good answer one way or the other. You ask one group of people, they think it's important and necessary. You ask another, and they'd say it's a complete waste of time. I will say this, it'll be a little disappointing, given the gravity of the events of January 6th, that there hasn't been a more thorough investigation of the issue. For example, there were no witnesses presented in the House, no evidence really presented in the House. There will be some evidence presented in the Senate this week, but there'll be no witnesses called. So it looks more and more like a political show trial than it does like an ordinary trial with evidence and decision-making and so forth. So I think how you feel about that sort of depends on what side of the political aisle you come down on.
Indeed, when we look at those events of January the 6th, of course, we're all appalled by what happened. As someone who used to work for Donald Trump, as someone who supported Donald Trump, are you ashamed of the way he conducted himself around that time and didn't do enough to intervene, I suppose, and call for calm and peace?
Keep in mind, there's a couple different things, and the trial itself, the impeachment, is actually quite narrowly focused, which surprised a lot of folks in this country. It only deals with the president's actions prior to the riot, from the beginning of his speech until the riot as it took place on January 6th. So that will be a very narrow focus. You ask folks like me who have been critical of the president's performance during the entire riot, and even we will say that what the president did is probably nowhere close to incitement to riot, which is a criminal offense under our federal statutes and so forth. So the fact that the Democrats have so narrowly tailored it makes it sort of difficult to answer your question. We don't think the president really did that much wrong prior to the riot. One of my criticisms of him, or actually my criticisms of him, focus on his activity during the riot and immediately after, but that has nothing to do with the impeachment trial that starts this week.
I accept your point, and I think it's important, and from a distance, I would agree. I think it's very hard to argue that the president incited that behaviour. The people responsible for violent behaviour are the people who actually got involved in it. But I suppose my question is a broader one about people who are political supporters of Donald Trump. Are you ashamed, given the repercussions in the American political system, that you have a president who has not conceded defeat, has not accepted he lost the election, in fact continues to tell people to argue that he was robbed?
Yeah, Chris, it's hard to put your finger on one particular emotion, be it shame or embarrassment, frustration, disappointment. But clearly, some of the most ardent supporters of the president, and I was one. I was a co-chair of one of his national campaigns for re-election, were extraordinarily disappointed and saddened by the president's behavior during the riots itself. He did not come out strong enough against the rioters while the events were taking place. When he did go on television late in the day, he said things like, to the rioters, "We love you," et cetera, et cetera. No, we don't. We do not love people in this country who seek to stop the constitutional transfer of authority by violence. That's the exact opposite of how we feel about those folks. So, yeah, listen, it's been several weeks now. I think a lot of us had a chance to sort of sit back and analyze what happened on that day, and we're still unsatisfied, that would be an understatement, with the way that the president conducted himself on the day, during the riots, and immediately after.
Has his behaviour since the election actually diminished everything he achieved in his 4 years?
Probably, and that's a shame of it because we had so much to take credit for, Chris. You probably followed from a distance, but we had record low rates of unemployment in this country. More people were working in this country than ever before. There was lowest black unemployment ever, the lowest female unemployment ever. We had so many things to be proud of. We had no new wars overseas for the first time in a president's term in my lifetime. Tremendous successes that we could have looked back, even having lost the election, and said, look, we lost the election, but look at what we accomplished in 4 years. And if the president had wanted to use that to run for re-election in 2024, that was available to him. But as I've often said, you don't get to offset good tax policy against armed insurrection. And what I think will happen is that history will go down as Donald Trump being somehow connected to that riot, and that will overshadow everything else that he and the rest of his team accomplished.
What about Donald Trump now? He's gone quiet, of course, but we expect to hear from either him or at least his family in some sort of political reincarnation. Do you believe that that will be through the Republican Party, or do you think that the Republican Party establishment will disown the Trump family now?
Well, I think it's fair to say it won't be through the Democrat Party, even though his children were registered Democrats up until, I think, after his first election. So, and there was some discussion about whether or not Ivanka might run as a Democrat in some states. But put the Democrat Party aside, it'll be interesting to see. The Republican Party had a really good week, believe it or not. Here, there was some efforts to throw out both a very conservative and a very moderate member of the party, and both of those sort of failed. The party rallied under the argument that the Republican Party is a big tent. And of course, in a country of 350 million people, when we only have two real political parties, you have to be a big tent, or else you're going to end up being in a permanent minority. So I think that the party has done well. Certainly, they'll have to figure out how to adjust to Donald Trump as a former president who might still run in 2024. His children have shown some interest, and his in-laws have shown some interest in running. So, yeah, it's going to be a very fluid situation in American politics. But so what? It's always like that over here.
It sure is. They have been interesting times, and they're going to continue to be for some time to come. Thanks so much, Mick, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Going to be an ugly show there in Washington over the next few days. We'll bring it all to you here on the program. I don't think it's a good way to reunite the United States. Mick Mulvaney, by the way, took time out from watching the Super Bowl to do that interview, so good on him.